My circumstances are not my identity. My bank account is not my identity. How much money I have is not my identity. It's just how much money I have in the moment. Well, I'm not my bank account. I'm not my living situation. I'm not even my past.
You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to helping everyday men build legendary relationships with yourself, your partner, and your world. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is simple: to help you navigate life with more clarity, more confidence, and purpose-driven action, with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and today's guest is a wonderful man, Mr. Bryan Reeves. Bryan is someone who I met, a few years ago, maybe 5 or so years ago now, when I lived in Sydney, and he was on holiday and tripping around Australia, and a good mutual friend of ours introduced us and said, "You guys have got to connect. Bryan's out, go and catch up." I met him at a little cafe in Bronte, and we jammed for, an hour or so. And it was beautiful because it's one of those experiences where, a trusted friend goes, "You guys will definitely get on and meet." And we chatted and we jammed and we shared our stories and we dove in. And since that time, I've been a keen follower of his work. I've learnt, certainly from him, and I love some of his content. It really resonates with younger Mike, most definitely, and also, Mike now and the work that I do, and I know the men that I support as well, quite possibly you. Bryan is actually, I'll jump to his bio and we can explore from that. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have him on the show as well. He is a former United States Airforce captain. So he is currently coach for men and women in relationships. But I was fascinated as to how someone gets from being an Air Force captain to this work. So let me go through it. A former US Air Force captain, after surviving multiple dark nights of the soul, Bryan is now a life coach and relationship coach for men, women, and couples all over the world, supporting them in creating thriving lives and relationships. His viral blog, Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her, has been read by over 30 million people worldwide. Holy shit. And his 2 books on Amazon, one of them, his latest, now the continuation of that blog, Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her, is available, and you'll find all the links for that where this podcast is. And his other book, Tell the Truth, Let the Peace Fall Where It May. As well as those books, his online courses, including the Boundaries program, Relationships Suck Without Boundaries, I love that title, have helped countless thousands of people across the globe make sense of love and intimacy's often frustrating senselessness. And so Bryan brings these amazing perspectives to this work. And as he says, he is a relationship coach and has been doing that for many years, but there is more of a focus now on supporting men, specifically in the work that he does, a real resonance in there. And we explore that in this episode, his journey from being a young man who didn't trust men, and how that really led to, I suppose, a lack of trust both in himself, because obviously there's a man in there, and men around him, and how, man, that can create such a storm of confusion and struggle with identity. And we explore his journey from, going into the military and leaving the Air Force, just craving this sense of freedom, but at the same time still clinging to the identity that the Air Force had given him, right? And so how he didn't find that, and it really led him into one of these perhaps dark nights of the soul, in exploring and understanding himself. And what you'll hear in this episode is some of his amazing takes on men, and we specifically explore the idea of boy psychology and man psychology, and how this plays out today, both in individuals and potentially in things like countries and people in power. And so with that, we look at a little bit of archetypal stuff around the king and the warrior, and how for a lot of men today, there is still this need to transition from the hero, I am the hero, which is kind of the final stage of adolescent and boy psychology, into a mature man who isn't trying to save people and others and the world, but is in service. A beautiful distinction that Brian makes. We'll explore all of this in the episode. I really enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't come across Brian before, go and check out any of his links. You'll see all of that stuff in the show notes. Otherwise, please, as always, if you are a follower of this podcast, make sure that you have clicked like, subscribe, download, see first, all that kind of stuff. And if you're new here, hey, welcome. Fuck, so good to have you here. I'm Mike. This is the Everyday Legends podcast. This is where I hang out and talk to some people, and sometimes myself, that really am talking to you. Hang around, there's plenty of amazing stuff in here. And if you want to get to know me better, if you want to get closer to some of my work and my content, then of course head to my website and you can find all of that stuff there, including right now, depending on when you're hearing this, of course, but close to release, we have an intake going and open for application inquiries for my major coaching program, the Everyday Legends Academy, where we support men in building and living legendary lives. And of course, there's a lot to that. But find the information on the website, reach out, send us an email if you've got questions. This is the work we do, supporting men and taking that step from perhaps what we haven't grown out of yet. Even though we might have grown into biological men, there's still a lot of that adolescent and boy psychology running the show. And speaking to Brian, knowing my own experience, we see this playing out in so many men. And it might not be very obvious with that terminology, but when we explore it in this episode, you might see the things that resonate with you. That is the work that this can be about. Really stepping into maturity, into what is possible for you, and therefore with your relationships and in your life. I trust that you enjoy this episode. If you enjoy it, please I ask you to share it with someone who you think might also benefit from it. Otherwise, it's time to get into the show. Let's do it. Bryan Reeves, welcome to the Everyday Legends podcast, brother. It's great to have you here.
Mike, I really appreciate it, man. I'm glad to be here.
Now, I'm taken back to when I'm fairly certain it was a mutual friend, Mark Groves, introduced us. You were coming out to Australia. I was living in Sydney at the time. And I came and met you. I think it was a cafe in Bronte, and we hung out and had a conversation. And I just, like it was a few years ago now, but I love that in this work, and we'll really want to explore, the work, what the work is for you. We can meet these people who, 10 minutes previously we had no idea about, and, can open up these possibilities. So thank you for joining us today. And I want to dive into your world, and where I want to start, Brian, is, man, you can take this question wherever you want.
Okay.
Who is Bryan Reeves?
Oh, who is Bryan Reeves? Oh, yeah, I've answered that question in a bazillion different ways over the years. Who is Bryan Reeves today? Bryan Reeves, I'll answer it this way, I suppose. Bryan Reeves is a 46 years exquisitely aged man who is, I have a great life. I'm really grateful for what I've experienced and what I've created for myself and what life has created through me and all of that. And I am still very much a man seeking home with like a capital H, still evolving, still growing, still learning what it means to be a true adult and in the world, and to all the things. So I'm a very much a man deep on a journey. That's how I'll answer that question today.
Beautiful. Thank you. I love where we can go with that, because me too have answered that question in numerous ways over the years. So deep in it. Beautiful. So then, can you tell us, what do you tend to spend the majority of your time doing, being?
So, what do I just spend the majority of my time doing and being? Well, man, again, another question I could take in a million different ways. But the reality is, my work, my creative work that also that fulfills me creatively, that pays me financially, that satisfies me purposefully, all of that is,
Mm,
I work as a coach and a writer. And for the last 8 or so years, I've been really specializing in relationship coaching, working a lot with couples, writing a lot about relationships. I just came out with a new book called Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her, which I'm really excited about.
mm,
But that book is also really a capstone on the last 8 years of my work, really focusing on relationship dynamics. What I've been moving into more in the last couple of years, and it's very, um, it's it's indicative of the internal evolution I myself have been undergoing, has been focusing more on working with men.
mm,
So in the realm of men's coaching. And as I say, it's indicative of the journey I've been on myself as, 46 years old. I don't I didn't really know that I didn't know anything about how to be a man until I didn't even know I didn't know that until I was 39 or 40 years old. So in these last few years, as I've been, the last 6, 7 years, I've thrown myself
mm.
into that question for myself, and discovering, Mike, as you know, that's a pretty common experience for
Yeah.
men. Um, that the last few years, it's just naturally unfolded for me. And I will say, Mike, I've resisted it all the way until
Mm.
recently, to work more and more with men
Right. And
exclusively.
was that, so thank you for that. Was that something, okay, what was prior to that 39? Was
Prior
there
to that, I
was there
was
a resistance to even exploring that, or as you said, you just didn't know that you didn't know it?
Well, I didn't know that I didn't know it, and I had a lot of stories about men in my brain,
Mm,
stories that were not favorable to men, which is
mm,
unfortunate because I'm a man, right? But the stories, yeah, men are hard to work with. Men don't want to do the work. These are the stories that I had. Men
mm,
don't want to do the work, especially I'm focusing more on relationships.
mm,
Women care about relationships. Men really don't until they have to, you
mm,
know, um, these kinds of things. But again, it was very much a reflection of my internal disconnect from my own manness, from my own masculinity, from my
mm,
own just projected outwards. If I don't
mm,
know how to be a man and what it means to be a man, if I'm disoriented around my own inner manness, well, of course, I'm going to look at other men with great suspicion
mm,
and and distrust and dislike even.
mm,
So, from that place, yeah, I resisted it. For all again, yeah, it's easier to make money working with women. Women are
mm,
just easier and more fun to work with. They're all of that. I got three sisters. I didn't have brothers. I had sisters. I got two
mm,
mothers.
mm,
My fathers were just barely holding on for dear life, while my moms were really holding the world together. So all of these things. So it's that you've heard that saying, Mike. The mess. Yeah, let's see. The mess is your message. Your mess is ultimately your message.
mm.
I mangled that a bit, but in your
We
mess,
we
you
got
can
it.
find your message.
Yeah.
And that's the work that I'm doing today. Is even when I was doing relationship coaching exclusively, that also, though, it's because I messed up relationships for 20 years, you know?
Yes.
Um, so yeah,
I can put my hand up. Thank you for that. So,
yeah,
can you take us through then a little bit of that journey of the stories, the stories around men and your own madness, right? I love that.
yeah,
How did you kind of get to that point? Because I recognize that in myself, and certainly in a lot of men that I've worked with, and
yeah.
possibly that are listening to this, the idea that we can have stories that are fucking up a lot of stuff,
Yep.
specifically around like being a man and what you then potentially project out and onto other men, or the idea of other men,
Hmm.
perhaps.
Well, growing up, and obviously I only see this in retrospect, but I had essentially two examples of manness to that I could see, look out into the world and see.
Mm,
The one example was the aggressive, dominating, conquering, insensitive, just I'm going to eat everything up around me and fuck everybody and just take everything for myself. That model of manhood.
Mm.
And then on the other pole, there was the weak, impotent, floppy, just pushover model of man.
Mm.
Those were the two poles that I was looking at, the two choices that I basically looked out and saw in the world. Neither one of those were palatable. But then on top of that, I was in a fraternity in college. I was in the military. After
Mm-hmm.
college, I spent 5 years active duty Air Force service in the US. And so I was in these kind of hyper, what I'll call shadow or maybe immature masculine
Mm-hmm.
domains where the immature or shadow masculine energy ran rampant.
Mm.
And so, which just further taught me I can't trust men. I can't trust masculine energy. I mean, I knew how to be around men. I was in a fraternity. I was in the
Mm.
military. I knew how to be around men, but I knew how to be guarded. I knew that I
Mm.
better be guarded. I knew that I can't trust men. Not
Mm.
really let them into my experience to be vulnerable with other men.
And so when you say I knew how to be around men, is that kind of saying like I knew a way, I had learnt a way of being around men, but it wasn't necessarily like
That's a
me being
great way to
myself
put it.
around
Yeah.
men?
No, that's a great distinction. Yeah, I knew how to be safe around men by pretending that I felt safe.
And
Or
then with that retrospect, I don't want to stop your
yeah,
flow, but I'm interested in
that's
this,
okay.
right? From my own experience as well. With retrospect, do you think that a lot of those other men were also in the mode of, I've learnt this way of being around men?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I think, working with men as we start to have real conversations with each other in containers created for that purpose,
Mm.
it's amazing how across the board men start to melt
Mm.
that armor that we all carry.
Mm.
It's so beautiful to see otherwise, men who present as otherwise invincible,
Mm.
unassailable, impenetrable, invulnerable. It's amazing to see that melt and men to cry, to laugh. I mean, laugh from the belly, not just from the neck up.
Mm.
To confess painful secrets
Mm.
and vulnerabilities and wounds, and to see that happen amongst even again the most externally appearing strong men.
Mm.
It's such a profound experience to have.
It is, yeah. And also that next step, which is like, and they didn't die and the world didn't end. And, on some level, depending on the context and the timelines, there's a growth and potentially becoming stronger for it, right?
Yeah, well, and exactly. On the contrary, not only do we not die, a softening happens that allows us to also, like, our we often will see the reflection from our intimate partners who will say, wow, you're just a little easier to be around these days.
Mm.
I can feel you present more in a way that I couldn't feel you before. A lot of guys, it can be hard for us to put our fingers on it, but it's in the being, allowing ourselves to be witnessed in our vulnerability by in safe ways and safe containers with other
Mm.
men. Oh man, it's like the burden that we're each carrying by ourselves because we don't feel safe in the
Mm.
world. We don't trust other men by and large. The burden that we're able to then just put down, or at least feel like we got brothers helping us to carry it. The relaxation, the ease that begins to enter the body, it serves everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. The lightening of the load, right? I
Yeah.
at some point have taken it upon myself or learned maybe that I need to carry that. And I also can't show other people that I am, right? I have to, as you said, present as invulnerable, impenetrable, etc. That's heavy, but it can dissipate, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean something about you if you lighten the load or bring others on the journey with you, right? To carry some of that, or make sense of it, or at least lighten it.
And you have a child, right? How old is your baby?
She is almost 1 year old.
Almost one, man. Congratulations.
Thank
Oh,
you.
that's so beautiful. I don't have a child yet. My partner and I we've opened the window for
Uh-huh.
that to come into our lives, God, life willing. But I already feel a burden in the programming of in the man programming that culture and society has
Mm.
offered to me, and perhaps maybe there's even some primal understanding that yeah, it's my role to provide
Mm-hmm.
and protect and all of that, and the stress of that I'm aware of, the stress in my brain and my thinking, just having a partner, or wanting to have a partner. And like you have almost a 1-year-old child. I wonder, how did that experience of a burden? Did you feel more of a burden when your wife got pregnant, when you had a
Mm.
baby? Did you like what happened? I'm curious what happened for you,
Yeah.
Mike.
So, well, I mean, like really clearly for me, I was able to witness what was happening at the time. The moment my wife told me she was pregnant, there's context to the story and all that kind of stuff of getting pregnant, but like I felt this overwhelming protectiveness.
Mm,
And then that kind of came in waves, but it was ever present. It just heightened perhaps in waves.
mm-hmm.
So did that come with burden? I think it did, but I think I was fortunate to have enough self-awareness that I didn't, get into a hole, let's say, where that was huge.
Yeah.
And I, isolated myself with it. I had men and community around me that I could speak to and so on. But I would say that's what it equated to. Then when we started to have the conversations, the logistical ones around her stopping, working in her business, and then me
Mhm.
providing, the sole income to support us, etc.
Mhm.
That then, ramped things up most definitely. But I feel like it was, I was able to view some of it from I get to do this, like
Yeah.
I really get to look after these beings. Yeah, but I do see how that easily could take a turn, and how it has in a lot of men that I've spoken to, right?
Well,
And it impacts the ability to show up and do the thing.
well, you're describing, I think, the consequence of discipline and practice around mindset, around self-awareness, around being aware of the
Mm,
temptation of the mind to go into these stories and programs. And let's face it, I mean, at least in the States, structurally, men, we don't have a lot of support structurally.
mm,
We're expected to carry the burden on our own. And it's not like anyone's there watching whether we succeed or not. But boy, if we fail, ain't much there to help us through
mm,
it.
mm,
So I think, what you're describing, like, it's a privilege to be able to
mm,
have this experience, a privilege to be able to care for my partner and a child. And, I think, Mike, what, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, I had no money. I was broke. I was beginning my coaching journey, but I'd already been an entrepreneur for many years, and financially, I was at rock bottom. Wasn't sure, didn't know how I'd pay rent. That month, I was living in a friend's guest bedroom here in Los Angeles, and I mean, I was having a lot of success with my writing, but you don't
mm,
get paid for blogging.
mm,
I hadn't figured out how to get paid for that
mm,
yet. So, and now, you know, now I didn't even now my monthly bills are somewhere in the area of $10,000 a month. That's my
mm,
monthly nut, as we say it. And there are months where if I give into the old temptation, what a burden this is. Oh man,
mm,
all the bills, all the responsibilities, all this. But I'm grateful that I have that point of reference from
mm,
8, 9 years ago when I had basically nothing, and I was yeah, well, I just basically had nothing. And I was like, man, every time I pay my rent, I mean, my rent alone, I live in Los Angeles. We have a beautiful home just over the hill from Beverly Hills, and we're looking over the valley. Beautiful home. I pay almost $5,000 a month just rent.
mm,
And the old stories tell me that's insane. My family stories
mm,
say that's crazy. That's a fortune. How could you possibly pay that much for rent? And stressful part. I mean, I realize because we're taking our conversation in a direction, sort of playing off of what you were sharing. I hope that's okay.
Please.
Um, but it's a disciplined practice that every time I go to pay rent, that I hear the voice that says, "Oh, $5,000, that's painful." But I like, sit off to get off to the side. And it is a privilege to get to be able to pay this $5,000 to live in this beautiful home, to have this experience. I discipline myself every time I write that check, send that money off to my landlord. Like, man, I am so grateful I get to pay this money, that I have this to pay. And so it's so, but I work at it. It's a discipline. I'm vigilant about it. And because that temptation is always there to go back into the belief that life is a burden. I'm on my own. I'm screwed if I don't mess this up. All those stories. And
and so how would you, if you have the reflection, how would you say that then impacts on all those other days in the month where you are essentially doing many things, but one of them being creating the income to do that and show up in your business, in the way that you need to support the people who you are supporting, etc.
Yeah. Well, first off, it keeps me in a good mood for the most part. I mean, I have my cranky days, but if I'm experiencing life as just a daily burden of all the things I have to do in order to maintain what is, that's just treading water and surviving. Well, it's hard to really create inspiring, meaningful content. At least I guess, at least in the way I want to do it. If I'm just grumpy all the time because of all the burdens I'm carrying. So that's number one.
Can you speak to a different time, because we got to the coming out, the fraternity, where perhaps you were in that burden carrying mode, and how that did impact, because you said 20 years of relationships that didn't potentially go so well prior.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, through much of my 20s and 30s, even when I got out of the military, at 26 years old, I got out of the military. I'm totally miserable. I can't feel anything. I'm a walking dead person. And I went traveling because I knew I was just useless to the world. There was just nothing that I could do that would be meaningful or valuable in a way that had meaning for me anyway. So I just picked up a backpack and went traveling. But even in my traveling, I carried such a burden. See, I wanted to be free. That's why, in the military, and I was basically 10 years obligated to military service from the time I was 17 to the time I was 26. So all I wanted was freedom, this idea of freedom. So I get out of the military.
Like all the way through, like even when you were 17 kind of, and you joined?
Well, when I was 17 and I joined, I wanted to be a pilot. Why did I want to be a pilot? Because I could fly, break the bonds of gravity, man. Freedom. It's the ultimate sort of freedom to a 16-year-old, fast jets that go through the sky. It definitely is. There's a freedom drive inside of that.
And so then did that relationship to freedom change a little bit as you went through those 10 years?
Definitely. Well, first off, I didn't get to be a pilot. So I immediately felt trapped by these new circumstances I was in. Like, I'm obligated. They paid my way through college. I'm obligated. And I don't like what I'm doing. I'm miserable here. This isn't fun. This is not in alignment with my heart, which I didn't even know what my heart wanted to do. I just knew it wasn't this. So trapped. I'm trapped. And that created, I'm grateful for that now because, it informs so much of the work that I do today. But when I got out at 26, it was like, all I wanted to do was just hitchhike on an open road somewhere on my own. Yeah. Every guy, I think when it comes to intimate relationship, I think every man, and I wonder your experience on this, but I think every man goes through at some point in his relationship to the experience that I don't feel free in this. This feels like a trap. I'm trapped. I can't do what I want, or my partner has some kind of upset or some kind of experience that I don't know what she or he wants from me, and this sucks. I need freedom. I need out. I need space. I need whatever. I need to be able to do whatever I want to do. And obviously, not every man's going to identify with that, but I had that in the military. You know, it's like I need out of this. This sucks. This is not what I'm supposed to be a part of. And yet I was contractually obligated to be in it for what turned out to be 10 years. And so then I got out thinking, okay, man, now I'm going to be free. Mike, I felt anything but free. Sure, I could go wherever I wanted, but I still felt trapped by life. I was miserable, man. I had all the freedom in the world. I still felt dead inside. That was a moment of profound crisis. Profound crisis.
What happens there for you?
Well, it looks like a nervous breakdown in a phone booth in North Wales.
Right.
Because I was 30 days into this trip where I'm supposed to finally feel alive again, and I still just feel dead. And I don't know where to go. I can't go back, but I can't go forward. I don't know where to go. The only people that I could think to reach out and connect with are not available in that moment. I'm being mistreated because I look like a vagabond traveler, and I'm not being treated like the former United States Airforce officer that I believe in my head to be, that I still am. You know, I'm not getting the respect that I think I deserve.
So part of this, like, I want out of that, but also I want some of it with me.
I can't, if I'm totally out of it, who the hell am I? You asked that question.
That's a confusing place to be, right?
I had lost and I didn't have an answer anymore. Because before that, you know, I may hate it, I may not enjoy it, but I'm an officer in the United States military. You know, that commands a respect. So here I am again. I don't know who I am. Don't know where I'm going. I can't go back, can't go forward. And I'm still carrying this. So I'm carrying this burden. And I remember even, you know, I had maybe 30 grand in the bank saved from just military pay savings. And I remember I put myself on a budget of like $30 a day, which included lodging at that time. You know, again, here you go. The burden of life, it's all on me. If I run out of this money, nobody's going to help me. Nobody's going to save me. I have to figure this all out myself. And so I remember on that trip, like I would make choices that really just, it's like I kept myself in my own prison. You know, I kept myself that burden of responsibility of I am alone and I have to figure it out all by myself. Just perpetuated itself for years.
How did that go?
Not well. It didn't go well at all. It didn't go well at all. And it would bleed out, of course, into my relationships with women where, you know, I believed myself to be generous, but I no doubt showed up stingy in countless ways. It hurt me and it hurt my partners, and you know, and so it's a lesson and a discipline that I keep with me daily still.
Yeah. So for you, where did that unburdening, when, across what time period, how did that happen?
I think it happened slowly over many years. There were definitely some pivotal moments, again, as I said, where I was like, maybe, I guess now it's been 7 or 8 years where I literally didn't know how I was going to pay rent to my friend living in his guest bedroom. And there was a moment where I just decided, you know what, that's okay. It's finally okay that I don't have money. It's finally okay that I don't know where it's going to come from. It's finally okay that I'm just going to show up and do my work because I know what I'm here to do and to offer. I kind of figured out my service to the world, my purpose. I connected to it. If life wants to pay me for that, fantastic. If life doesn't want to pay me for that, fantastic. I'm willing for all of it. That was really one of the primary pivotal moments in my life, was like a willingness for things to not work out the way I want them to. That distinction right there, the willingness to be I don't know, a disappointment, the willingness to be let down by life, the willingness. It's like, I think, even sexually for a man, when he can communicate his desire and be willing for his potential partner to say, no, thank you, that is a powerful fucking place for a man to live. The
Mm,
willingness to hear no, the willingness for things to not go the way I think they need to go. That right there for me was like, in so many ways. I mean, even as a coach, I remember before that willingness to hear no from a
mm-hmm,
client, and after the willingness to hear no from a client. Like my my coaching practice exploded after I became fully willing,
mm.
even a little bit excited to hear no, to hear the clarity of no from
Yeah.
a potential client. Like that's been game changing in so many ways.
So I love this, and I also recognize it in myself and so many men in different areas, right? And often what sits in there is a fear of rejection and deeper. So what was that for you? Was it in around the context of money? You said a bunch of things there. Was there something that you can pin it to at the base of it, or a series of things where it just started to
Yeah.
click? And then what was the
Yeah.
difference, right?
Yeah.
Clarity. What actually shifted for you to show up more powerfully?
Yeah, it seems to all come down to this kind of two things, and maybe it's one even beneath that, but this the fear that I'm not worthy of love,
Mm-hmm.
and I have this other fear that I'm gonna fail at what I came here to do in life. Like I'm not gonna live up to my potential, whatever the hell that
Mm,
means. And kind of in my late 30s, it started to look like if I don't have money, for example, no woman will love me. That's how it sounded
mm,
in my brain. If I don't have money, no woman will love me. And because what it means, like if I run out of money, it means I'm going to have to move back to Maryland and live in my mom's basement. And I'm going to be a 40-year-old man living in my mom's basement with no money. Who the hell is going to love that guy?
mm. Yeah, what does that mean about
That
me, right?
What does that mean about me? That was it's like, just kill me now. Just kill me now. I won't be able to participate in life at all. That was the fear.
Mm,
That's kind of just distilled down to its, sort of basic essence.
mm,
And I had a huge epiphany while working with a coach myself around that fear. And it sounded like this. The epiphany was, money has nothing to do with how I love. Money has nothing to do with how I love. And all of a sudden, inside of that sort of mind reframe, that mental, that story reframe, all of a sudden I had this vision of this man, me, living in my mom's basement in Maryland, but with the biggest heart, like just the capacity to love like no man has ever loved before. And I thought to myself, holy shit, any woman would be lucky to be loved by that man.
mm,
That changed the game, because all of a sudden I became willing to live in my mom's basement.
mm,
It's like I became willing to run out of money it's like I became willing to
mm,
just live my life. At that point, what the switch for me happened, because until that point I was holding on to it desperately, like it was a life preserver.
mm, mm,
Just keep me afloat, money. But that doesn't work. You sink.
mm,
Money is it's not a flotation device. It just collects water and gets waterlogged and you sink.
mm,
That At that point, money started becoming rocket fuel for my dreams. When I separated money from my capacity to love, that distinction right there changed the game for me, because again, I became willing. I became
mm,
willing for things to not go the way I thought they should. I became willing to be broke and destitute and living in my mom's basement, because I knew I had the tools, I had the capacity to love anyway. And it was like, well, if a woman can't receive a love from that guy because he lives in his mom's basement, okay, cool. She's not my woman then.
mm, mm,
But because the woman that is my woman, that's just a detail. Me living in my mom's basement, that's a detail. It's transitory. But the love that I can offer, that's legend.
Mm.
So that it's that willingness, willingness
Yeah,
for
yeah.
life to not go the way I want it to, knowing that I can still show up and fully inhabit and fully offer my gifts in any moment. Oh man, I have right next to my computer, behind my computer, I have a couple sayings that are my mantras that I came up with for myself, and I, before every coaching session, before every interview, whatever, they're right there to remind me of these new stories.
Mm.
I like to call them thrival stories.
Nice.
And the one on the bottom is, in love, I am unstoppable. In love, I am unstoppable. Man, that is so profoundly calming and
Mm.
energizing to my nervous system. All right, but again, I gotta cultivate it. I gotta
Mm.
keep that alive by, that's why I have it on the wall
Mm.
right behind my computer. It's why I look at it before I do something, before I'm interacting with somebody in this capacity, because my mind is lazy. My mind is looking out. My brain is looking for all the things that are going to kill me, all the things that are going to ruin my career and shut me down. And,
Yeah, so all those
that
things are
doesn't
still
serve
very
me.
normal despite all of this, right? Despite the willingness and the
Exactly.
change and the shift. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, Beautiful. I love that. And there's a couple of things in there, like, so I had the image as well of like, if you were trying to stay afloat and someone goes like, I don't have, all I've got is coins. I've got lots of them. Well, that's really going to make you sink, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
the more I try and grab for something, you spoke about money there, but also I kind of picked it up earlier in the story as well. The more I'm trying to really control and constrict something, I'm not coming from an expansive place. Things can't really grow from there. And then the other thing was, like this often there's this grab for money with the idea of, I think, the idea of financial security, right? But
Mm.
potentially a lot of the time, especially for me in my experience, there is this like real lack of definition of that. And so we just feel like more financial security will mean I can feel more secure. And, you skip to you being in your mom's basement. That might not look like financial security, but that shift in you was a man secure in himself. And of course,
Yeah.
we can skip forward through all the story, but that clearly shifts who you are and how you are. And there was a word you used there, which I really love, which was, like the living in the basement thing can be a big deal if it's for a certain woman. She's not your woman, but it's transitory.
Yeah.
And that security allows you to know that this isn't my permanent thing, but it may be for a
Right.
time, so I can
Right.
take the next step. And
Yeah.
clearly those next steps have been taken.
That's right. I mean, it's a reminder that my circumstances are not my identity.
Mm.
My bank account is not my identity. How much money I have is not my identity. It's just how much money I have in the moment.
Mm. Mm.
And yeah, so it's creating separation from, again, it comes back to the question, well, who am I? Well, I'm
Mm.
not my bank account. I'm not my living situation. I'm not even my past. I mean, there's a real freedom in
Mm.
that. I'm not my relationship. I'm not, whatever. And I see this with a lot of guys that I work with, where this drive for freedom. I need to be free. The drive to freedom for a lot of men, I notice, looks like, and it has definitely looked like this for me.
Mm.
I can even see little teasings of it sometimes in my thoughts, and it's still there. But freedom will be had when my partner gets off my back, or freedom will be had when I get out of this relationship, or freedom will be had if my partner just stops nagging me or lets me do whatever I want,
Mm.
or as you said, freedom will be had when I have enough money,
Mm.
et cetera, et cetera. And that freedom is fleeting at best.
Mm.
That freedom is unsustainable, because even if you it's like what I had with the military. Freedom will be had when I
Mm.
get out of the military. Well, that not only was it fleeting, it was non-existent.
Yeah. Yeah. And as
Because
you said, you still wanted to be back in there through the identity of, right, but I am the ex-serviceman.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
totally.
Um,
And this just to land that plane, this recognizing that, the willingness, again, coming back to that
mm.
willingness for life willingness for my partner to be cranky, willingness for my partner communicate unskillfully and maybe criticize me or tell me what to do, even though we both know that doesn't work for our
Mm.
relationship. But the willingness for her to be human,
Mm.
the willingness for me to run out of money,
Yeah.
the willingness, all of that, man, that's the most abiding and sort of deepest sort of, non-drug induced state of freedom that I've ever experienced.
Yeah. And also, what I'm actually hearing in a lot of this for you has been a willingness for you to be human. Right. This,
Yeah, for
when I
sure.
come across the
Yeah.
impenetrable, invincible, and vulnerable, right, it's often this idea that we've taken on board that I'm not allowed to
Yeah,
be
that's right.
human. And so
Yeah.
there's something that I want to circle back on, but also I think it leads into, there's some content that I've seen from yours. There's a couple of posts. So I want to share those, just the brief punchy post that you shared on Instagram. And then, yeah, maybe this links to that story around, like men and can I trust them? And I think that there's some things that have been peppered in what you've been talking about as well. One of them was this: boys save, men serve. And then the second one, and you might want to separate these. I see some links. Boys fear women. They also fear real men. Can you detail that? Those go wherever you want with it for us.
Man, I'm working a lot these days with that transition time from boyhood, adolescent psychology and way of being
Yeah, so not necessarily age, but where we are in our development psychologically, perhaps.
Well, I find a lot of men, and myself included, don't even begin making that transition until their late 30s at the earliest. If, and many men don't hit it till their 50s or 60s, and some men I don't think ever get there. Don't ever make that transition. Stay in an adolescent mindset.
Yeah.
Right. So, we can see this a lot in our, boys save, men serve. In fact, in the men's group that I'm leading right now, I have a program called Elevate. It's a year-long journey for a small group of men, and we're actually exploring this archetype of the hero, the masculine archetype of the hero. The book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. So the hero is the sort of last of the boyhood archetypes that come online, and it's the archetype that prepares the boy for adulthood, or the girl for that matter. It's just a masculine archetype that begins to prepare us for stepping into mature adulthood, which I say is, and not just I say, but which in a lot of literature, developmental, like a lot of research and developmental literature that talks about the stages of human development. As adults, we are in service of the community, of which we are a part. But as true adults, we're not just, lining our own pockets or doing something to make ourselves look good. And that's what the savior complex is really all about. It's about, I'm going to be the savior. I think of, did you ever play sports, Mike?
Yes.
You must have. Yeah. I don't know. You don't necessarily have all the same sports we have in the States. I know there's some differences, but I remember, one of the things that is on the basketball court, every boy has ever done that thing where he dribbles the ball and goes 5, 4, 3, 2, and he shoots and he scores and he wins the game. Like, catching, shooting, scoring the game-winning basket.
Yeah, on the buzzer.
On the buzzer, he's the one that saves the game.
Yeah.
It's that save the feat. That's the hero archetype that wants to save the day. And you find this in a lot of men that, let's say, go into intimate relationship with a savior complex. I'm going to fix this person. They have problems. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix them. I'm going to save this person. I'm going to rescue them. And a lot of men, if they're presented with another partner who doesn't need their saving, well, he's not interested. He's out. That's not interesting. He doesn't feel needed. But it's not a sustainable dynamic. We see it in our politics. I mean, we've seen it, in the United States, man. It's fucking chaos here. It's crazy right now. And
Mm.
so much of the conversation amongst men especially is we need to save something, save our country, save our nation, make it great again, or just whatever, save the children, save whatever the battle cry is. We got to save something, and I'm the one that's going to save it. No one else can save it because I'm the only one that knows the problem and I know how to save it. It's horrible. It's a shit show. We're in total gridlock because all of this savior energy is in the room. All of this adolescent, I'm going to save this. And there's very little talk of true service, right? Adults, men, we serve, and service isn't an imposition. I'm not going to force this on you. That's saving again. I'm going to force something on you because that's what you need. Well, I like to come back to intimate relationship a lot because it's a great kind of microcosm of what I think we experience everywhere in our lives. But that, it's like the man that comes in and knows what solutions the relationship needs for it to be better, rather than being in active conversation with his partner about, well, how do we move through this together? How do we find our way together in partnership? Like a lot of men, that's a really hard conversation to have. It has been for me for a lot of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm getting there as well is that as partners, we can both be in service of the relationship, the thing that we are creating. Yeah,
exactly. And as partners, we can be of service to what we're creating. And that's, boys save, men serve. That's the distinction I think we're serving in partnership. We're sensitive to the needs of the whole ecosystem, not just what will fill my pockets or make me look good. That's the concern of the adolescent.
Yeah. And so then perhaps this extends to things like, when you save the planet as opposed to being in service to and of the planet, on a different scale.
Exactly. Even in that conversation, there's a lot of, we need to save the planet. The planet has a momentum of its own. It's like, I think
we need
more
to get
interesting.
Out of the way.
It's like, how can we partner with what is happening? Yeah. How can we partner with what is unfolding? And I'm certain that there are some adults there are many adults in that kind of conversation. But overwhelmingly, it's either we need to save capitalism, we need to save the economy, or we need to save the planet.
Save our way of life, right?
Save our way of life, exactly. We need to save the status quo. And that is, again, another adolescent, come back to that other quote, boys fear women, but boys also fear real men, because the adolescent mind, it fears change. It fears being overwhelmed by that which it cannot control. And we can't control anything in life. We could barely control ourselves. And probably then that's probably, even saying that is ridiculous. I don't control my breathing. When I do, it's exhausting immediately,
Yeah. And so if I'm in savior mode, then I feel like I have some control. And so if I go into service mode, I have to let go of.
Yeah.
And show up and be present. Is that?
Show up and be present.
Yeah.
I have to be in an active inquiry with the moment, with what is rising in the moment, with what is arising in the people or person around me, with what is arising, active inquiry, rather than, what's the word I'm looking for? Rather than absolute conclusion or certainty. Right? Save your mind is all about, I know what needs to happen here, and I'm gonna fight for what I know needs to happen.
Yeah.
There's no inquiry in that. There's just certainty. I know how this goes. And there's also the fallback to, we see this a lot in even in kind of religious conversations. Even if I don't know how this goes, God knows how it goes. And let me tell you what God thinks about how this goes. And it's like this. So I'm using God to affirm my certainty.
Yes.
And then here comes the savior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a big conversation there, because the word savior is pretty central to that. So because what I'm getting here is, like this kind of boy adolescent psychology, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how does this shift? How do we move from this? In fact, before we extend into that, there's something that's just come up for me, which is, your 10 years of military and service, and something that is, very common for a lot of people. And in the US, and you said, right, there was this extension. I went and I was in a phone booth in North Wales and still wanting to cling to that. But service is the word.
Military service.
Yeah, but is that actually made up of people in service, or are they there to save?
Well, it's a great question. I'm sure there's a lot of nuances and a lot of different experiences and points of view. And when I look at this archetypally, the military, for example, is an expression of the warrior archetype. And the warrior ultimately exists to serve the king. And if the king is up to no good, or if the king is up to, again, self-serving, if the king is functioning as in a shadow expression of kingliness, which is like, it often shows up as the tyrant king, and the warrior is in service to a tyrant, well, that's going to be deeply troubling. Many warriors do it because it pays the bills. It keeps them safe from the tyrant king's wrath. We see this the world over in images of police, of soldiers who are serving a military leadership or a dictatorship. We see this civilian soldiers brutalizing their own civilian brothers and sisters, but they're in service to a shadow king.
Yeah.
And look, the US is obviously not a dictatorship, not yet, but and democracy is very much imperiled here. But even when I was going through back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I think just the drive to profit, the monetary focus of civilization, there's something innately, to me, there's something innately what is the word, just off with that. And to serve as a warrior to a profit-driven king is problematic. And so it is a service, but the question is, in service to what? That's what am I serving through offering service? And we find it becomes, again, very self-focused. Well, I'm serving a tyrant king who's serving his own pockets, but what am I doing but serving my own pockets, serving my own safety in the service of the king's lining his own pockets, just speaking archetypally. So it's still a very self-focused, not community. It's not a genuine, it's not an inquiry with what the community needs. It's just it's the certain conclusion that money is where it's at, and let's serve that.
And so do you think then that still comes from this place of that kind of, boy adolescent psychology?
I think it does. I think it's very much, for a boy to really step into man psychology, there's a number of elements that need to be in place. One of them is we need the blessing of wiser elder men. And in a world that we lack elders, we lack wise elders. I certainly, when I look up and look who are my elders, I pretty much don't. The ones who I say are wise elders are the authors whose books I've read, the teachers I've studied from afar, or if I've been lucky, at close, but in fleeting interactions. I'm not surrounded by wise elders. And I think that's the case for most of humanity. And I mean, in my country, we put our elders in nursing homes. We get them off our hands as quickly as possible because we just don't know what to do with them. And so it's part of what's missing is the blessing of the wise elder, essentially leading us through the initiatory passage from boyhood to manhood. So without that, we're stuck. Without that, we're totally stuck. I mean, how many men listening to this can say that they have the regular and consistent praise and witnessing from wise elder men saying, "You're doing an amazing job. I'm proud of you. You know, you're on the right path. Keep going," or offering us guidance. I don't have that.
Mm.
I mean, how many
Yeah.
men have that? So, you know, there's that part of me that always feels that there's a wounded part of me. And I actually spoke this into one of my men's group, that a peer men's group that I'm in. I spoke this just a couple of days ago. That part of me that was feeling unseen,
Mm.
unacknowledged by you know, my peers and my elders. Um, that hurt, that is an ongoing hurt and pain that, you know, I care for, I speak into my peers to sort of just, you know, and they show up and they reflect back to me. And, you know, but I have to ask for that. I have to speak
Mm.
to it. I have to know that it's there. Most of us don't even know that it's there. So we don't even know what to ask for.
Mm.
We just know that, man, I'm fucking lonely. We might not even know that.
Mhm.
Anyway, I could just keep going on and on about that, Mike.
No, I thank you. I love it, and you know, it's something that has become very apparent to me. You know, we touched briefly before we started recording about, you know, my situation and moving back to New Zealand temporarily and being around family. And part of
Right.
that is like, you know, as I said, like having family around, them getting to meet our baby, her interacting with them, but also like what are we not being around them? What are we missing out on? Like
Yeah.
becoming a parent is a very fucking important and monumental thing.
Yeah.
And, you
Yeah.
know, in a village that encompasses, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, we all have the child still in us. And that process, that progress perhaps into, you know, manhood and the stages, right? You don't turn 18 and you're a man and then that's it until you potentially become an elder or an older who is in
Yeah.
an elderly home. There's so much there. And, you know, what I'm hearing as well and what you shared there, Brian, is the witnessing, the being seen, you know, the assurance on some level of, you know, like take that step and, you know, you'll be okay and great job taking that step, is perhaps that's what we're doing in a very ineffective way into our
Yeah.
lives, into our relationships, of on some level acting to be seen and witnessed and praised, but in some really ineffective ways.
Yeah. Yeah. We all men, we need praise from, but not just from our followers or our fans
Mm.
or, you know, the people looking up to us. That's not the praise that help. That, if anything, that just feeds, that can feed the heroic
Mm. Mm.
consciousness that's just like, yeah, see, look how amazing I am, I'm
Mm.
saving all these people. That can go down a dark path.
Mm.
What we
Mm.
really require is the trustable, wiser elder who can see through our bullshit, who isn't praising us to just inflate our ego or because
Mm.
they put us on a pedestal,
Mm.
but who's really seeing, who's essentially um, showing us the way into our own mature manhood.
Mm.
You know, and who else can do that but a man in his own mature manhood?
Yeah, and you know, he has the sight and I suppose the perspective of why that is important,
Right.
not for a fleeting moment of that, you know, that man's ego,
Yeah.
but because I need you to be a useful member of this community, and I need
Right.
you to be able to do this for our, you know,
Right.
descendants, your kids, our grandchild, etc. Right?
That's right. And so many elder men, because they never got that praise, they
Mm.
never got the blessing, they can't offer it.
Mm.
You know, I have older men in my life. I don't think I ever receive any kind of praise or blessing from them. It's heartbreaking.
Mm.
It's really heartbreaking. And I think one place where it can arise is in men's groups. You know,
Mm.
being active participant in men's groups where we can both challenge each other but also praise each other.
Mm.
I think that's a place where I think all men should participate in an intentional group of men that have come together to have real conversations with each other and to both challenge each other but also uplift each other and praise each other and inspire each other. I think we need both of those. We need to be challenged, we need to have our bullshit called out, but we also need to be praised. We need to be seen and honored
Mm,
by each other.
mm.
I think that's essential work.
Yeah, and that challenge, and that can come from being seen, right? It's different if we look back to, as you said earlier, like I knew how to be around men, right? Like challenge in that environment is very different, right? Because it's the armor challenging the armor, essentially. The most accurate challenge is when someone has actually been seen, and the key to that is obviously a safe environment, because I can and we can, and therefore we can actually like pragmatically explore and move forward and grow with that testing element, right? So it has to have that environment where there is a container, and it's essentially a safe space, which are terms that we perhaps hear a bit these days, right? And also can have pushback. Mean what I mean need safe spaces for, right? Well, for many things,
Yeah.
one being this, right? So we can be more effective, mature men.
Well, if we don't have these, if we don't gather with other men in this way, what ends up happening is we use our intimate relationships then become the container within which we seek challenge, whether consciously or
Mm,
unconsciously. We challenge our partners, or we seek praise from our partner, whether deserved or not. It
mm,
just becomes a shit show because that's not the right container for it.
mm,
That's not what intimate relationship is for. It's not for our initiation into manhood.
mm,
That's that we're supposed to be doing that work with other men,
mm,
not with and not with our, even if we're in a same sex relationship with another man, it's
yeah.
still not his role to be my initiatory facilitator.
No, the partner role is a different one.
It's a very different role.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why it's so valuable and essential that men have these other places where we can do that work so that our intimate relationships can be a place of refuge for
Mm,
everybody and a place of shared feeling and shared experience and love
mm,
and it's like the harmony that I think so many men are expecting from their intimate relationships. Well, it ain't going to happen there if you're not gathering, I say, if you're not gathering with other men where you can do the challenge work that is necessary for you,
mm,
the challenge and praise work that is necessary for you to feel your manliness. It's not your, I'll just say in this case, it's not your woman's role or your intimate partner's role to remind you, to show you what a man you are.
mm.
If you're looking for it there, you're going to be severely disappointed and frustrated. So,
Powerful.
you know, anyway.
Yeah, because the other thing that allows us to do, right, is then come into the relationship as a place of safety, not looking to save or for saving.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, well said.
Um, Thank you for that. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm very aware of the time here. So what I want to touch on now, you mentioned it earlier, so I'd love for you to take us into it, is your latest book, Choose Her Every
Yeah.
Day or Leave Her. Can you give us a bit of a rundown on that? What does that mean? Choose her every day.
Yeah, choose her every day or leave her. Well, that back in 2015, I wrote a blog by that name, Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her, and that blog exploded, went viral. 1 million people a day were reading that blog, and
Wow.
it was pretty amazing. I felt like I owned Facebook for a day. It was just being shared everywhere. It was crazy, and that book, or and the book is really it's, as I said, it's a capstone on what I've been exploring and coaching couples with and working with for the last 8 years or so. I mean, exploring for 15 years, but actively
Mm,
teaching and coaching and working with myself, of course, for the last 8 years. But the book is an exploration of a lot of what you and I are even talking about right now. A lot of the things that are in the way for men, especially when it comes to being able to fully show up for a
mm,
relationship. A lot of the things that are both in the way, um, a lot of also practices about how we can move through. And it's really a book for men and women. I write parts of it directed at men. I write parts of it speaking to women. Um, but it's really a book about how to navigate. The subtitle of it is A Guide for Your Journey Through the Transformational Fires of Love and Intimacy. Because that's exactly what relationship has been for me, the
Mm,
transformational fires. And um, as I said, because men aren't being initiated outside of, in
mm,
our own spaces, yeah, because the intimate relationship is an initiatory container, if you will, an arena
mm,
for growth. Really, in the end, it's really about, we grow, men and women both. So the book has a lot of everything from kind of poetic stories of teaching stories of things that I experienced and woke up to through painful
mm,
relationship experiences, learning about jealousy and
mm,
sort of pulling that apart and what is that and how to move through it and dance with it and how to overcome it, and also communication skills. I work with a lot of masculine and feminine uh, intimacy dynamics and
mhm,
different language tools that speak to someone. If I think what happens in a lot of relationships is two people are having completely different conversations with each other. They're having, the couple
mm,
is having an argument, but one is arguing. It's like they're being a stand for freedom, and the other is being a stand for connection. And on the surface, those two seem completely opposed to each other.
yeah,
Because if we're truly bonded and connected, well, we're not free.
mm,
So many relationship arguments can really be distilled down to that primal battle between, the masculine and feminine values of freedom and connection.
mm,
So I dive into that in this book and offer practical ways of speaking, for
mm,
example, to your partner. If you can hear that they're more connection oriented, well, it doesn't serve to use freedom language with them.
mm,
That's just going to piss them off, in fact. And they're going to buckle down on their connection language, which is going to piss off your freedom concern. Um, so, in the book, I help unravel that and help and offer all kinds of different, again, tools and language tools of how to help your partner,
mm,
hear what they really need to hear, not what you need to hear, but help your partner
mm.
hear what they need to hear, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
And of course, like, without coming in on the intention of I'm helping and fixing you, but how can we communicate and meet in the middle as partners, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
ultimately, my parents divorced when I was 4 years old, and it was, you know, it was a both a formative and the most painful
Mm,
experience of my life. And from the age of 4 on, my family would never be together again. The people I love most, it was not a nice divorce. It was
mm,
nasty. And so that's a pain that I've carried with me my entire life. So, you just said the words in partnership. Even when I'm working with couples, I don't ever, even in my paperwork that you sign, there's an acknowledgement that our work together may end your relationship. You may discover through our work together that your time together is complete.
mm,
I don't believe a successful relationship is one that just stays together. I believe a successful relationship is one that learns, where two people learn how to stay in partnership no
mm,
matter what happens, even if the agreements and the form of the relationship shifts and
mm,
changes,
mm.
and they do decide to separate, that they do so
Yeah.
in partnership. That to me is true success in relational work. Staying in partnership no matter what happens. And that is absolutely possible if two people are committed to it. And that's
Beautiful.
really what the book is ultimately about, helping people navigate that.
I love it. And, also what I'm getting in there is certainly for our side as men is an invitation to step into our mature psychology and,
Yeah,
being of service to the relationship as opposed to perhaps trying to save. Um,
that's right.
Brian, I love it. Thank you so much for joining us and taking us on a journey there and all sorts of things. I'll obviously add all the links and so on, but if you can give us verbally, where can people find you?
Thank you, Mike. My website, bryanreeves.com. I mean, everything's there. And it's Bryan with a Y, Reeves.com, BRYANREEVES.com. Everything's there. My book, all my blogs, programs, social media stuff. I mean, I'm all over the socials. But Mike, I just want to say, man, I appreciate your questions and your lights as well. And you've been a great facilitator, holder of this conversation, man, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Could have these conversations all day, right? That's part of, I think, why we get into the work, because it nourishes us as well.
Absolutely, no doubt. Yeah.
Thank you very much, brother.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show dedicated to helping everyday men build legendary relationships with yourself, with your partners, and in your world. If you have got something from this podcast, please share it with someone that you think could benefit from it. And please visit your home for podcasts. Like us, subscribe to us, leave us a review. Your feedback is phenomenal in getting this in front of more eyes and ears. Until next time, I'm Mike Campbell, and remember to build that legendary integrity.